Hey, everybody. Welcome to Your Money Map, sponsored by the Alliance for Lifetime Income. I'm your host, Jean Chatzky. Very glad to have all of you along with me today for what promises to be a very interesting and very important conversation. I want you to imagine for a second that your loved one misses a credit card payment, or maybe they forget to pay the electric bill. Or maybe you just notice that they're doing a little bit more online shopping than usual. Are these just financial hiccups, or are they hints that perhaps something more serious could be going on? According to research, they could be early warning signs of dementia. My guest today, Dr. Lauren Hirsch-Nicholas, has been at the forefront of studying the link between cognitive decline and financial issues. She is a health economist, a professor at the University of Colorado. Her work uses clinical and econometric approaches to answer questions in medical and health economics, particularly when it comes to dementia, surgery, and end of life care. And her research has been recognized with prestigious awards, including one from the National Academy of Social Insurance, the John Hines Dissertation Award, and the Academy Health Article of the Year Award, among many others. I'm thrilled that she's here today to weigh in on some new research about the impact of undiagnosed memory disorders on our finances, and also to tell us all what we should be doing to protect ourselves and protect the people that we love. Dr. Nicholas, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. And I just want to remind our audience that we like to keep this conversational. If you're watching, whether you're watching us on Facebook or LinkedIn or elsewhere, and you've got a question, maybe something is going on in your life with a loved one and you'd like to know if it's a warning sign, or maybe you'd like to know how to protect yourself in advance, or if you just have a story to share, please feel free to type it in the comments. We'd be happy to weave it into the conversation. Lauren, you've been at this the forefront of studying the link between cognitive decline and financial issues for years now. Tell us why you went in this direction with your work. What motivated you to study this subject?
I think it started from hearing stories about people's personal experiences. Gina Colada at the New York Times was, I think, at the forefront of documenting some of this for a lay audience and really drawing national attention. And then some of our clinical collaborators were talking about, seeing it in patients one-on-one, where the event that would bring them in for a dementia diagnosis was actually a pretty catastrophic financial loss. So we would hear about, losing a family business or getting swindled out of a house, and just, really terrible events that make you wonder, are these so common that we might see them not only in our research data, but also if they are that common, we really need to act and find solutions to this. And so we also sort of realized it was a place where some of the tools we use in economics and the very large data sets could be very well better understanding whether this was actually as large a problem as some of the stories were suggesting. And I'd say the bad news is that we could see these adverse events happening in our data set and happening, 6-8 years before people were developing other more sort of typical clinical symptoms of dementia.
That was the part that was the most striking to me, that your research actually, because you're looking at the economic data, your research shows that a person's wealth, a household wealth, can start to take a hit, as you said, 6, 8, sometimes 10 years before they get an official diagnosis of dementia, and that those people who have undiagnosed memory disorders are more likely to start doing things like I was talking about, missing bills, as early as 6 years before a diagnosis. How I mean, not to put the cart before the horse, but how do we know when something is a problem and when something is just a blip?
Well, I'd say as someone who's missed my own mortgage payment once or twice while doing this research, you definitely want to realize that some of the time these mistakes are just, being distracted and forgetting. And I think what's tough about this presentation is we'll see some of these sort of financial problems happening, while at the same time, if you gave someone a cognitive test, they would appear to be cognitively normal. And it seems like the financial capabilities are some of the first things that we lose. And it's really like an early warning sign, but then we almost need things to get worse before we'll be able to say, oh, yes, this was the first sign, versus, other things were going on and you forgot to send in a payment.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think we see it in finances first? And beyond missing a bill, what are the other red flags?
Well, I think one of the things that's sort of interesting about this, and it's partly because managing our finances can be so complicated and require so many different skills, is different people will experience different financial events, right? So in some people, it's missing bill payments. In our research, we looked at bills that were more than 30 days past due, which means you didn't just forget once, but at least one reminder bill came and you still didn't pay. So it's more of a prolonged situation. We hear stories all the time of sort of missed tax payments, kind of like you mentioned in your introductions. Some people change their shopping behaviors. I think we've seen stories of people like going online and deciding they need a new truck, or suddenly buying hundreds of pairs of shoes and just filling the house with Amazon boxes. So it's not like we found one missed event or one financial mistake that's like, this is definitely a sign of dementia, but it's this heightened risk of sort of errors or uncharacteristic behavior in many aspects of our financial lives. And I think that's sort of the other thing, is it's this change in pattern from the way you've always been. So like if you're constantly a very opportunistic shopper, then it's maybe not an alarming change when this happens. Or if you've always struggled financially, then that might not be the same symptom as someone who, reliably pays their bills the day they receive them. So I think we sort of think about like, what's this catastrophic event, but it's also this like break in your normal pattern.
Right. To a different degree than many people might think. I mean, you've pointed out that sometimes these changes aren't caused by forgetfulness. They're actually caused by a change in risk tolerance, that these dementias can make people behave in ways that they otherwise wouldn't, in terms of taking on more risk. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the other tricky issues with dementia more broadly, is the many changes to your personality. So people do perceive risks differently. They also change their perceptions of their own abilities, and in particular, overconfidence can sort of manifest and be a problem. So, you may be missing bill payments and forgetting to only buy one pair of shoes, but you think you're doing better than ever. And so that can also make it challenging to have these conversations, right? Because there's a greater risk of it being a little combative, or you don't understand what a good job I'm doing. And so I think we have to understand that this whole constellation of changes is occurring, pretty much all of which are bad for our abilities to manage our own money.
One of the other places that we see changes, and this was a new study that just came out from the New York Fed, found that a person's credit score begins to decrease 5 years before a dementia diagnosis. Mortgage delinquencies started to increase about 3 years before. And one of the more surprising data points was that 1 year before diagnosis, average credit card balances in delinquency increased more than 50%. I know this was not your study, this was the New York Fed's, but what was your take on these results? Did they surprise you, or is this just another piece of data in what you've been seeing all along?
Yeah, I think the Fed study was actually following up on some work we had published earlier, and basically backs up our findings in a larger sample. So I'd say we were definitely not surprised, because we've seen all of this before, and it kind of, like we were talking about, it's not the same people who are having all of those different adverse events, but many patients with dementia are experiencing sort of at least one of the things that you're mentioning, and experiencing it before any clinical care is being initiated.
One of the differences that we noticed, and we saw it in research released from the Alliance for Lifetime Income in the second chapter of what we call PRIP. It's the 2024 Protected Retirement Income and Planning Study. It showed 48% of women said that they are concerned about making complicated financial decisions as they age due to the possibility of a potential cognitive decline. That compares to much fewer men. Only 36% of men said the same. Do you, what do you think accounts for those differences? And do you think that women have greater reason to be frightened?
I think in especially the older generations, men are still doing larger shares of household financial management. And so Joanne Chu, who's one of my co-authors, has done a lot of work looking at how financial management changes as one partner develops cognitive impairment, and shows that men are often doing it first, and then sometimes women will take over as there are signs of the husband's impairment. Women also live longer on average, so should expect to sort of have some time where they will be the only person available in the household to do that money management. In some of our other work, we've looked at people who continue to manage their own money, even though they've developed either mild cognitive impairment or dementia, and many of those people are living alone and don't necessarily have someone else in the household to take over. So I think just these demographic realities are one of the dangers that I think people should be concerned about, what's going to happen, especially given our lack of effective treatments for dementia and other cognitive impairments.
It's a very good point about being alone. We know that 42% of women who are in what the Alliance calls the peak 65 zone, the large share of people right now, baby boomers who are turning 65 on a daily basis, they're single, they're divorced, they're separated or widowed. They are alone. And so it's on them, these women, to manage these things for themselves. Let's get tactical, Lauren, if you don't mind. I know in your research you had hoped that by isolating these earlier points of impact, you'd be able to potentially help people, insert somebody to help them pay the bills, insert somebody to help with those tasks of daily money management. And that's proven to be very difficult. Why is that? And maybe we start with recognition and then talk about solutions. How should we start to look for these problems in our parents or in ourselves?
Yeah, I think it sort of starts with greater willingness to talk about money than we often have societally, and sort of a recognition that, we are great at treating physical health problems, but not so much cognitive decline. So if we're lucky, we're all going to get to a point where we're extremely at risk for these financial problems. And, building some protective strategies where it's not just you, but you have a team. So we have, at this point, relatively weak federal legislation that gives banks a role and other financial institutions a role for helping to protect. But in the past few years, financial institutions have all been encouraged to collect trusted financial contacts on every account. I know, even though I study this, I ignore all the emails. It's like, don't you want us to talk to somebody else if you see a problem? And, I should practice what I preach and put that into place, right? Realizing that, something could cause us to be incapacitated, and that's a time when we really need that money, right? It's not like if we lose it later in life, especially because of cognitive impairment, that, oh, I'll just go back to work and earn that, right? So I think we should be sort of understanding that this is like a bigger societal problem that we haven't been able to solve, and that puts many of us at risk, sort of despite our best efforts. And that means, letting people into our financial lives, whether it's a trusted friend or family member, a paid advisor, online services. There's a lot of different ways to go, but I think enlisting at least one. We've also talked some about, just like you want to diversify your portfolio, you may want to diversify your advisors, since friends and family are, not only the most logical people you might want to trust, but they're also the most likely to commit elder abuse, and, have a trustable relative is not a policy solution that, we can just make that recommendation for everyone. So it may be that, if you tell 3 people, maybe one of them is going to try to take advantage of you, but the other 2 will be able to protect you more. So I guess I sort of think about it as, sorry, go on.
No, I'm wondering, is it enough to have somebody on your account as a trusted financial person? I just recently lost my mom and was, her power of attorney, and understood that there were certain financial institutions where I had to fill out separate power of attorney forms in order to get them even to talk to me. But I'm wondering if giving somebody's name as a trusted financial person with a brokerage firm or a bank is sufficient to allow that bank or brokerage firm to even talk to that person?
I think it gives them the ability to talk to them, but it doesn't necessarily give them ability to take action the way like your power of attorney would. So I think it's a step in the right direction, especially if we can get better at sort of developing tools to catch some of these warning signs, right? So if the bank gets in touch with you the first time there's a missed payment, and then you can discuss with your loved one sort of putting a strategy in place, that's great. Whereas if the bank is calling to say, we just wanted to let you know that suddenly your dad has a new 20-year-old wife who he just gave access to all of his accounts. We're a little worried about this, but we have no ability to stop it.
Then at
Then
least you've gotten a heads up. You said recently in the New York Times that people in the early stages of dementia are also much more vulnerable to scams and fraud. So clearly, potentially, this much younger spouse is a vulnerability for an older parent, and having some trusted people on the account is one step in the right direction. What else can we do to prevent this from happening, or at least prevent not recognizing that there is a problem underway?
well, there's currently services in the private market that you can enroll in that will kind of monitor all of your accounts and sort of look for these uncharacteristic patterns, as well as just making sure that you're getting all of your bills paid. Services like automatic bill payments are great because you're at least not going to have the electricity cut off for going to having your house foreclosed on because you're not paying a mortgage or something like that. So we can take steps to automate some of our lives. But I think the other pieces are really just bringing in outside assistance, whether it's from family or friends or from financial services providers. There's also definitely a role for public policy to do more. So I think letting your legislators know that you're really worried about this. I think currently financial institutions can't do a lot of sort of sharing between institutions. And so like your credit card knows that you've missed 2 payments, but the brokerage that has a retirement account for you might not know that we're seeing these financial symptoms of cognitive impairment, right? And maybe you have your regular bank account at a third institution, and there's very little coordination at this point. And so that's where one of these services, or someone who can have a full 360 view of your accounts, would be able to see the weird thing no matter where it's materializing.
You mentioned that even once you start to see signs, these are complicated and often very difficult conversations to have. Taking away or discussing the idea that your parent may not be equipped to drive the car anymore is incredibly difficult. I'd put something like this in the same category. It is a huge blow to the idea of autonomy and independence. What words have you found to be successful in having these conversations?
Yeah, I think it's super tough to deal with. We had in my family, my mom had sent me a check on an account where I guess my dad uses more often, and Chase thought that she was committing fraud and debited the money back out of my account. And, when you get a letter from the bank that raises concerns about your parents' financial management like that, it's super horrifying. And I was like, you guys have to go to the bank and figure out what's going on. And their bankers didn't even know, right? Like, it took several people up in the hierarchy and multiple visits, and I think was stressful for all involved to eventually figure out that Chase thought they were, doing the right thing, protecting them. And so we eventually realized that, the strategy is mom should be writing more checks so that they recognize her handwriting, and this doesn't happen again. Just sort of realizing, best case scenario is she was sending money to me, and nothing bad happened when they took it away, other than we all got upset, right? But if she had paid an actual bill, and then Chase comes along and is like, Con Ed, we're taking this away, or something like that, she could have gotten hit with additional penalties and fees. If Chase had done it over multiple months, did they suddenly get services turned off? So I think thinking about some of the more extreme consequences of these small events were sort of useful for us. And I guess it was nice to go have a practice run on something that was Chase's fault, and not actually a cognitive sign at all. But I think the time and emotion that goes into this, it is really hard, and not something that we get training for, not something that the clinical world, where we usually diagnose dementia, doesn't really intersect with the financial world very much. And I think there's a real need for more resources on how to have these conversations, what to watch for. And so I think I'm really hoping to see more of these organizations, kind of like you guys, that are sort of at the intersection of research and real people, to kind of help make that happen.
You also raised the idea of additional public policy solutions. In your mind, what would that look like?
I think more ability for financial institutions to either stop or slow down some of these suspicious payments, potentially better data sharing. Some states do have policies in place where they won't shut off utilities for an older adult household until someone has gone and done an in-person visit. Some states will be like, you didn't pay your bill for 3 months, you don't have electricity, and that's hugely problematic for someone to navigate after the fact. And I think our experience trying to figure out why Chase even flagged us as possible fraud also does highlight the challenges of navigating some of these potential solutions, especially as impairment starts to set in. So it is a very tricky area of, how do we make things better without creating unintended new difficulties.
We talk a lot on this show about Peak 65, about this huge inflection of people turning 65. At other points during my reporting career, I've heard of advisors referencing something they call the 70-40 rule, which means if parents hit 70 or a child hits 40 and you haven't had the big conversation or started to have the big conversation about money and wishes, it is really time. Is there an age where you think that older people should allow a little more insight into what's happening, perhaps with credit score, perhaps with payments, in a way that doesn't feel so personally violating, perhaps?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's sort of hard to think about a specific age given, we see variation in when these events kick in, and to some extent, it's a competing risk of, is it dementia versus a physical ailment that's going to get to you first. So I feel like 70s and 40s seems like a pretty good time to think about it when we're still feeling relatively healthy. But I think the hard part is when you're feeling really healthy to be like, you don't think this could possibly happen to you, or you're not going to need this. And I think we do need to really reframe this as like, this is a fact of aging. And, for now, we can't stop that. If 5 years from now it turns out that some of these drugs are way better than what the tests look like, maybe some of these precautions will become unnecessary again. But I think, I guess I sort of think about it as like, if I keep myself as physically healthy as I want to, I'm like very high probability of living my research at some point.
Yeah.
And you just got to depersonalize it as much as possible.
We will do our best to do just that. Dr. Lauren Hirsch Nicholas, thank you so much for a really enlightening conversation. Scary conversation, but
Very, very
definitely.
scary and depressing, but I think super important for people to be aware of.
Absolutely. If people are looking for more information on your work, we've been dropping links to some of your articles and some of your studies in the comments. Is there another place that you would send them, a website that you'd like people to go to?
I think starting with the research and some of the articles and podcasts around that is great, and then organizations such as yours. That we've worked on some stuff with the Gerontological Society of America and AARP that are really trying to put together more sort of user-friendly guides to sort of start thinking about some of this planning, and even just understanding, what to expect, and what dementia might look like.
Yeah, absolutely. We publish a newsletter every a couple of weeks at the Alliance for Lifetime Income. It's a free newsletter. It's on all issues retirement and aging related, and we'll make sure that we drop some of your research in there as well in an upcoming issue, so that people who are interested can go ahead and click through and do some additional reading. You can find our newsletter at protectedincome.org/subscribe. Thank you so much, Lauren, for the conversation. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next time.